The guest, Liberal Senator Leah Blythe. Senator, good morning to you.
Good morning, Graham, and good morning to your listeners.
Where do we find you today?
I'm in Perth today. We're undertaking a Senate inquiry into youth incarceration. So we're doing hearings through a few capital cities in the country.
All right, thanks for giving us a little bit of your time. What are the highlights of the Senate of the past month?
There has been, I guess, a lot going on in terms of, I think last week's sitting week was very much taken up by fuel. And I think I sort of sat in the parliament for the whole week listening to the government during question time say there was no issue at all in terms of fuel. But the reality is obviously very, very different on the ground. And today we've finally got the Prime Minister who for the last week and a half has been saying nothing to see here, is now calling a national cabinet. So I think that's certainly been something that's been front of mind for the coalition over the last couple of weeks.
It's one thing to be critical of the government's handling of the fuel crisis. What would the opposition have done differently or better?
I think, and you're absolutely right, is we've got to make sure that we're constructive in these things. But I think ensuring that there is supply and not saying there's nothing going on. So I guess we would have acted sooner had we have been able to. But also the coalition always had a priority to increase fuel stocks. And under this government, a lot of those decisions were reversed. And so that minimum stock holding obligation is less under this government than it would have been under a coalition. So I think for us, it's about, you always plan for the worst, but we know that, in this country, regardless of what people think, and I was listening to some of your callers talking about we could all just drive electric vehicles. The reality is in Australia that 91% of our energy use is fossil fuels. So while people keep saying that the green transition is on, that is an absolute furphy, and we still very much rely on fossil fuels to get our food in the ground, out of the ground, and to the supermarket shelves at a minimum.
To be fair, Senator, though, both Coalition and Labor Party have been derelict in the duty in regards the IEA requirement. For 20 years they've been saying you've got to have 90 days fuel supply in storage, and we've barely had 30 days fuel storage. We're the only one of 30 countries of the IEA that have just flown in the face of this 90-day requirement. So I think both the Liberals and Labor are equally responsible.
And I think that is a very fair observation and criticism, Graham, that certainly under the coalition we could have done better as well.
Moving on, did you see the Four Corners expose on the South Australian government handling of the Algal Bloom crisis?
I certainly did, and that was something that I was, happy to help the ABC with. I think the Algal Bloom crisis, and I've had an FOI in with SA Health since September last year, where I was asking questions about their health, and that sort of came off of the back of the Senate inquiry that we did, which I still don't have a response to. Which I suspect once the election's over, they'll release it saying there were implications on health. But I think it just goes to show how opaque this government is and how fixated they are on PR rather than actually being honest with the Australian people, with South Australians. I think South Australians certainly didn't expect perfection. The Algal Bloom is something that we've never seen in our state before, but I think South Australians are very let down by the Labor government in relation to the honesty and the transparency that they've shown on this, and I think they've fallen very well short of public expectations around that.
The state election just 2 days away, a foregone conclusion?
You sort of never say never. I think South Australians deserve a real contest in the election. And I think, a government that faces no pressure has the ability to stop delivering. And I think we have seen that complacency in this Labor government that we've had for the last 4 years. They came in, they won 27 seats, which was a pretty good majority. And I think what we've seen is a whole lot of broken promises from this Labor Labor government. You know, they came in, I think it was, you know, vote like your life depends on it.
Yeah.
We will fix ramping. And obviously ramping is worse than what it was when they took office. So I think what we've seen is a government that has largely felt no pressure and hasn't felt like they've needed to deliver for South Australians. So certainly as South Australians are, you know, at pre-poll now voting, I think we really want to make sure that we are making sure that whatever happens and however they cast their vote, that they are considering what a government unchecked will do for South Australia.
The government made much of the Liberal Party having 4 leaders in the space of 4 years, and Ashton Hearn's only been in the job for 5 minutes effectively. What do you make of Ashton Hearn's showing so far?
Oh, look, I have the utmost respect and admiration for Ashton. She put her hand up when our party really needed strong, decisive leadership, and I am, you know, sort of, it gave great. I guess, buoyed me a lot to see how she just hit the ground running. She has a vision. She works hard for her community, and she has translated that into working hard for all South Australians. And, you know, I sort of lament and think, what if she had had more time? Because I think in the last particularly sort of few weeks as the campaign has really ramped up, I don't think I've seen the Premier looking as uncomfortable as he does, particularly going head to head in the debates that I think Ashton has excelled in. She's got a vision, she's got a plan, and I think, you know, given more time and for South Australians to really get to know her and what she's wanting to deliver, I think it could have been a slightly different contest, though I think she is certainly cutting through. So like I said, you never say never, so we'll wait and see what happens. But I think Labor have also underestimated the One Nation vote in some of their seats as well. And again, that goes to that arrogance and being unchecked. I think they've taken South Australians for granted, and I suspect even Labor will be given a shock at the ballot box on Saturday.
It would be fair to say, though, that most of the votes that will go to One Nation are coming from the Liberals or disenchanted Liberal supporters.
I think there is some of that, but I actually think there are some of those votes that are Labor supporters, because I think there are a lot of people who have always voted Labor who, you know, expect for things to be delivered in terms of jobs. And I think in that sense, they feel let down by the Labor Party. I think it's fair to say that both major parties have, you know, disappointed voters for differing reasons. So I think there is a disenchantment that also sits within the Labor Party, and I'm really interested to see how that will play out at the ballot box, particularly in some of those really safe, you know, dead red Labor seats where I think they haven't necessarily delivered for communities within those seats and they've taken them for granted. And I will be interested to see whether even some of those voters there will disaffect to minor parties.
Major parties once commanded 80-90% of the vote. Now it's down to about 50%. Is it understandable that people are just disenchanted with what the major parties are having to offer?
I think there is, and a lot has changed in the political landscape. It's certainly, speaking from my perspective in the Liberal Party, I think we haven't delivered on what we said we would, and I think that rightly so, voters are holding us accountable for that. What I would say is that the Liberal Party is, you know, rebuilding, and I think it's important that we actually do what we say we're going to do, that we get back to those values. I think Liberal governments have long been lauded for their strong economic management, and I think it's time that we start getting back to those really core policy positions on making sure that we are taking less from hardworking South Australians and Australians, allowing them to keep more in their pockets, because that is how we can make sure that everyone can thrive. So I think I can absolutely understand and appreciate why voters are feeling let down by both major parties. We've got to do better.
Senator, always good to chat. Thanks for your time today.